You're listening to the Cyberwire Network, powered by N2K.
Things that we recommend here is to separate your business account from your personal account. Keep business email for business and your personal email for personal use. And on top of that, enable 2FA.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the CyberWire's Hacking Humans podcast, where each week we look behind the social engineering scams, the phishing schemes, and the criminal exploits that are making headlines and taking a heavy toll on organizations around the world. I'm Dave Bittner from the CyberWire, and joining me is Joe Kerrigan from the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute. Hello, Joe.
Hi, Dave.
We've got some interesting stories to share this week, and later in the show, Arjun Sambamurthy of Armor Blocks, he's going to talk about some targeted phishing campaigns they've been tracking to weaponize various Google services during their attack flow. All right, Joe, let's kick things off with some stories here. Why don't you start it off for us?
Dave, as of this recording, the Mega Millions lottery jackpot is $750 million. That's $750 million.
Pretty soon you're talking about real money.
That's right. And you could be almost a billionaire. You probably won't be almost a billionaire. I don't recommend people buy lottery tickets.
It's a mathematical certainty that I will not be a billionaire.
Well, okay, so you have not bought a ticket, right?
No, I have not.
Okay,
I think of the lottery as being a tax on people who don't understand math.
Right. Yeah. I used to have a supervisor who said, if you buy a ticket, your chances of winning are only slightly better than if you hadn't.
Well, but you got to play to win, Joe. You got to play to win.
Yeah. My argument was they were actually infinitely better because your chances of winning if you don't buy a ticket is zero. And that kind of gets to what I'm talking about today. You know, I'm watching the news this morning, my local news channel, and guess what they talk about? They talk about the Mega Millions jackpot. It's front of mind, and guess who else it's front of mind for? It's front of mind for scammers. And Mega Millions has on their site a warning about fake lottery scams. And it's a short warning, but I want to go ahead and read it because this is a very common scam. And when these kind of things become news items, they're only going to become more common. So it says, with the heightened publicity due to a very large jackpot, Mega Millions warns of an uptick in scam attempts as scammers try to take advantage of an increased awareness in the game. But we remind customers that the only way to win Mega Millions is to first purchase a ticket from an American lottery and then match some or all of the winning numbers drawn. There is no random award of $1 million prizes and/or merchandise through social media sites or apps via phone calls, text, or emails. There are no international sweepstakes or awards. Importantly, no representative of Mega Millions would ever contact individuals to advise them of a prize. If you haven't purchased a ticket, you haven't won Mega Millions. And remember, you never have to pay a fee to claim a real lottery prize.
Right.
And they're saying that scammers are very sophisticated in their attempts to convince people that they've won a prize, which is nothing new that we've said. They also have this page on lottery scams, and they talk about how scammers are going to reach out to customers. They're going to come via email, phone, or maybe even through social media sites, and they're going to tell victims they've won a very large prize, including cash, cars, or some other goods. Here's a good trick, Dave. Sometimes they'll offer a free play that results in a prize. You want to try that right now?
Sure, yes.
So, okay, hello, Dave. I'm Joe from the Mega Millions Billions Lottery Jackpot. You've won a free spin. Do you want me to spin the wheel for you right now?
Well, what do I have to lose? Of course,
Nothing.
yes.
It's free. Okay, here we go. You win $1 million. Now, all you have to do in order to get that $1 million is send me a check for $600 for processing fees.
Okay.
And right, see, that's how this works. Of course, we're doing this, very tongue in cheek, but the scammers are going to do it in a very convincing way. They may even have a sound effect behind them, or have a stick that they bang together to make it sound like a wheel
ding,
clicking.
ding, 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 ding.
Right. They may play a sound bite from Wheel of Fortune. Who knows? Because this was on the Mega Millions site, it's very Mega Millions focused, but they have some of the names that people have used in these phone calls. They say the United States National Lottery, Mega Millions Mobile Lottery, USA UK Mega Millions Lottery, Mega Millions Corporation, Mega Millions International Lottery. And none of these entities actually exist because Mega Millions actually isn't an organization, it's a game.
And it's like the multi-state version of a lottery, right? I mean,
right.
Multiple state lotteries kind of work together to come up with this big prize.
Yes. Yes, they do. And that's how these prizes get so big. That and the fact that it's almost impossible to win. So it goes month after month of nobody winning, and the money just piles up.
Right.
Of course, most of the money goes to the states, to their treasuries, for whatever they want to spend it on. Here in Maryland, we wisely spend it on stadiums, right?
I thought we spent it on education. Are you telling me we spent it on stadiums?
I think I know at some point in time, maybe it was Powerball. One of these lotteries was funding the Maryland Stadium Fund. Yeah,
I see.
To buy the Ravens and now the Washington football team's stadiums.
You know, millionaires who own football teams, they need a little boost. They need all the help they can get.
Exactly
so why
right.
not? Right.
Don't get me started on this, Dave. This is something that really sticks in my craw. Right.
Moving on.
So what do they want? What do these guys want? They want you to send them money under the auspices of taxes or fees. They may want personal information. They may say, we're going to wire you some money, so give us all your banking details. And guess what happens the next morning when you wake up? All your money's gone from your bank because they know what your account is. They also do check floating scams. This is interesting. I hadn't heard of this one before from a lottery scam. They'll actually send you a fake lottery check and say, we need you to send us back, some processing fee from that as soon as possible. And of course, the check doesn't clear and the person's out that money. They have some tips on the website. If someone says you won a lottery that you never played, be suspicious. I don't say be suspicious. I say recognize this is a lie. You have to buy a ticket. If you're like Dave and you don't buy a ticket, and then what happens? You cannot possibly win this lottery, right?
Right.
If you're in a jurisdiction that's outside the area marketed for the lottery mentioned in the source of the prize, then it's probably a scam, right?
Yeah.
So if you live in a state that doesn't participate in Mega Millions, or if you are outside of the U.S. and you get a call about this, it's a scam. If you're told that you need to keep your win confidential, that should be a red flag, right? And here, actually, in Maryland, I was looking at the site the other day. It's state by state whether or not you can keep your win anonymous, but in Maryland, you actually can. If by some chance, and I guarantee I can't really guarantee, but I can almost guarantee this won't happen to any of our many listeners, that you win a jackpot like this, you should absolutely never publicly disclose that.
Oh, I mean, isn't it pretty much a certainty that if you win one of these, you'll ultimately end in ruin? Like the overwhelming odds are that it does not go well. Like you lose all the money, and even where you end up being worse off than you were in the beginning. Yes, a lot of the times that does happen, and there are studies about that. I think it's like more than 50% of the time people who win the lottery. I'm going off the top of my head here. I don't know what the paper is, but there was a study done on this, and you're absolutely right that over 50% of the time, people lose the money. Are you aware that in our very community, Joe, there is a home that is known as the Lottery House? I did not know that. Yes, there is a home. It is known as the Lottery House. It was built with the winnings. Someone won one of these lotteries, won multi-million dollars. They built a gigantic house. It's something. It is a big, big house, and it is not going to win any architectural prizes. It's known as the Lottery House, and ultimately the folks who built the house ended up getting divorced and losing the house. So there you go. Yeah. It's a cautionary tale. Right. They have a number of other things that are in here as well. Here's one that's interesting. If they tell you that you can verify that you've won by calling a number, that number is also part of the scam. Right. Now, we've seen this in other scams, right? This goes back for years where people would print up fake newspapers with lottery numbers in them and then show you a ticket that matches and say, I can't claim the prize for some reason, but you can buy this ticket for me for half the jackpot or for half its value. Right. And then, of course, the lottery ticket is worthless, right? Right. It may even be a real lottery ticket, but they've printed up fake information, bogus information. This is just the extension of that, just via a phone call. This is the best advice right here. If you think someone on the phone is trying to scam you, just hang up. Hang up and don't even say goodbye. Just click and let it be the end. Chances are if you do that, they won't call you back. Right. Right. All right. Well, it's good information. And, what happens as these Mega Millions grow, they get more and more attention paid to them. Right. It's an easy story for local affiliates to do. Right. Yeah, and people are interested in it. This is what you see. Yeah. And everybody dreams about hitting the jackpot and getting rich and all the wonderful things that'll happen to them. So it's ripe for scammers to take advantage of, for sure.
Yep.
My story this week comes from one of our listeners over on the Grumpy Old Geeks podcast, where I do a regular segment. You've been a guest over on Grumpy Old Geeks as well.
Yeah, I've been with Brian and Jason before.
Yep, fun show. Definitely worth checking out. This is from a listener named Martin, and he says, I've listened to every episode from you guys, but I've never heard you cover anything in regards to Venmo. Mm-hmm. Joe, you familiar with Venmo?
Vaguely. Isn't it a PayPal product?
I'm not sure who owns it. Maybe, but it's one of the variety of money exchange apps, right, where I need to send you some money, and so if we both have Venmo, both of us enter our banking information into Venmo, and we can send money back and forth, and it makes it easy to do.
Right.
So this listener, Martin, writes in, and he says, my wife recently sent a small transaction to a friend on Venmo, which triggered the both of them to receive a ton of friend requests on Venmo. Shortly after, she received a text message from a different friend and her mother confirming the payments she had asked for. She was baffled, as she had obviously not asked for anything. It turns out her friend and mother had received a message from her is in air quotes, claiming that she was at the store and had forgotten her purse. She needed $42 to check out and would pay them right back. My wife quickly changed her password, and I went ahead and disconnected all devices from her account in the security settings just in case. I thought at first that her Venmo account had been compromised, but it turns out that it was a lot simpler than that. Somebody simply looked her up on Venmo, all accounts are public by default, used her first and last name as well as her profile picture, and sent her friends payment requests at random asking for money. The people simply recognized her profile picture and accepted the transaction. The fact that you can freely change your profile picture, first and last name, as well as username as many times as you want and without any verifications or any checks at all from the Venmo app boggles my mind. You would think that a company which is solely used to transfer money in between parties would have a modicum of basic security checks in place. Yes, you would think so.
Yeah.
I have not heard of this before. This makes total sense to me, in that it could be done this way. I have to say my experience with Venmo is very brief. I believe I have used it once or twice. I think my wife uses it pretty regularly to send money back and forth with her friends, and maybe even with our son, our oldest, who doesn't live in the house anymore. The thing that I remember when I started using Venmo was that when you sign up for Venmo, the first thing it does, as many of these apps do, is it tells everybody that you're on Venmo.
Right, yeah.
Hey, so Dave's on Venmo. Great, great news.
Great.
All right, I get that. And I agree with Martin here that boggles my mind is that the default is that all of your transactions are public. So the other thing I did when I joined Venmo is I started looking around at some of my friends, and I remember one of them was like a local politician friend of mine, and it says, Jane sent $15 to Bob, Jane sent $15 to Joe, Jane received $45 from, and I'm going, what? I don't need to know this, and
right.
I'm sure that this person doesn't want me to know this. This is no one's business but theirs. Why in the world would you have this be public facing? I guess it's so that Venmo puts across a sense that people are actively using this, that, this is the place to be. Look at all these transactions going by. Isn't this great?
I talked about Venmo with our systems engineer, Chris Venghaus, and he and I were having this discussion about it. I said, have you ever used Venmo? And his response was, I don't like Venmo because of the social networking aspect of it. And I'm like, and when I heard that, I was immediately put off by it. So that's why I've not used it, is because it is like a social network. Now I'm hearing this, I'm further convinced I don't want to use it.
Yeah, I mean, look, at its core, it's a useful app, and lots of people use it for legitimate purposes. But I have to say, I agree with Martin here that the fact that you can change your profile picture and your first and last name as many times as you want, and that information doesn't have to match your banking information.
Right.
This, to me, seems like a major security issue with Venmo, because
I would agree.
I wouldn't, because I do this show, but I can imagine many people, if they got just a casual request from a friend that said, hey, can you send me $20? I'm like Martin said in this example, I'm at the store and I forgot my wallet. Can you send me $20? I'd probably do it.
Right.
So anyway, the lesson here is, if you use Venmo, make sure that everything is set private. And also, if you get a request for anybody to send you money, and I would say beyond Venmo, use another method to verify it, right? Call that person using the phone number you have for them or send them a text message or something. Get off of the platform that they used to make the request and use something else as a second factor to verify it's a legitimate request.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that way you're much less likely to find yourself scammed by one of these things.
Right. If you do use it, can you go in and set your profile to private so scammers can't find you to send
I believe you can. Yeah, I believe you. I'm not sure about your profile itself, but I know you can set your transactions to be private, certainly. And that's a no-brainer. I mean, come on.
Why isn't that the default?
I don't get it. I don't get it.
Either.
All right. Well, our thanks to listener Martin for sending that into the Grumpy Old Geeks podcast. And again, that's a fun show, fun irreverent show worth checking out if you consider yourself a grumpy old geek, which I know you and I both do from time to time.
Very much so.
It's a show worth checking out. All right, Joe, it is time to move on to our catch of the day.
Dave, our catch of the day actually comes from my son, who received this message in his email. And it's a rather threatening message, but it comes from David Bowditch, allegedly from the FBI. Dave, why don't you read it?
I'll just read the return address here to start off, because that really sets the tone for things.
Right.
Federal Bureau of Investigation, Field Intelligence Group, J. Edgar Hoover Building, 935 Pennsylvania Avenue, Northwest Washington, D.C., 20535. Attention, beneficiary. I am the Deputy Director, Federal Bureau of Investigation, David Bowditch. We intercepted and seized a sealed envelope at the John F. Kennedy International Airport, New York, coming from a foreign country. We scanned the content of the sealed envelope and found it contained a sum of $4.1 million value certified payment bond. Also, the sealed envelope had documents with your name on them as the receiver of the package. We questioned the diplomat that accompanied the sealed envelope into the United States, and we learned that he was to deliver this sealed envelope to your residence as payment of an inheritance, winning prize payment due and owed you. The envelope paperwork lacks proof of ownership certificate and legal delivery permit clearance certificate form. We confiscated the envelope and released the diplomat. The sealed envelope, according to Section 229, subsection 31 of the International Commerce Regulators Code Enforcement Guidelines, lacks proof of ownership certificate and legal delivery permit clearance certificate. And since the content is valued financial material of such amount from the joint team of the Federal Bureau of Investigation and Homeland Security, you're to reply for direction on how to procure the envelope so you will be relieved of the charges of tax evasion, which is a jailable offense under Section 12, subsection 441 of the Tax Code. We will also be asking the IRS to launch an investigation on money laundering if you do not follow our instructions. You are required to reply within 72 hours. At that point, I will walk you through the process of clearing and claiming your money. Failure to comply may lead to your arrest, interrogation, and/or you being prosecuted by the court of law for tax evasion and/or money laundering. You are also advised not to contact any bank in Africa, Europe, or banking institutions for security reasons. Yours in service, David Bowditch, Deputy Director, Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Menacing, no?
Well, I mean, money laundering, tax evasion, these are all things that'll grab your attention.
Right, yeah. They're gonna sick the IRS on you. I mean, even though I don't think the IRS handles money laundering investigations, I think that's done by the Federal Bureau of Investigation or by the Secret Service. I don't know who does it, actually. I think just the FBI. I don't know. But I know the IRS doesn't. They handle tax evasion, but not money laundering.
Yeah.
But there, a couple grammatical errors in this. It's obviously the opening part of a scam to get you to pay some money to release some money to you, or maybe possibly to garner some personal identifiable information. I chose it today not because it came from my son, but because of the amount of just threats that are in this thing. It's a good one.
And I could imagine once they get your attention and you call in, they could say, oh, well, thank you for calling. We've cleared all this up. We've established that, yes, you are indeed entitled to this $4 million. All we need from you is a check for $600 for the taxes or clear whatever.
Right.
And the money will be yours, and Bob's your uncle. There's the scam.
Right.
All right. Well, that is our catch of the day. Joe, I recently had the pleasure of speaking with Arjun Sambamurthy from Armor Blocks, and he and his team have been checking out some phishing campaigns that have been taking advantage of some Google services. Here's my conversation with Arjun Sambamurthy.
last month, we saw a spike in benefactor scam attacks, right? So we were trying to figure out hey, why this interesting, spike in benefactor scam? So benefactor scam kind of attacks, this kind of like a variant of Nigerian scam. It's been happening for a long time, nothing new, right? Then we started digging in deeper, and then we found out, hey, the attack by itself is nothing new. The content of the attack is not new. But what's different was how the attack was actually delivered to the users, right? So then we realized, the attackers are actually starting to use Google services and Google products to deliver these kind of attacks. Then we started looking in further to just figure out that a whole lot of phishing campaigns, not just benefactor fraud, a whole lot of phishing campaigns are starting to happen via Google services. That's how we started looking into this. And we observed the same thing pretty much across all of our customers. And then we thought maybe it'd be an interesting thing to actually let the people know about how people are actually exploiting Google and leveraging Google services to launch these kind of phishing campaigns.
Well, let's walk through it together. I mean, what did you discover and how did you go about discovering it?
I mean, one of the things that came of interest was just take a specific example here. It's a benefactor scam. So if you look at the blog post that we published, so the email actually comes in from someone claiming to be a childless widow. And they say, hey, I have cancer and my husband has passed away due to COVID. And we have this huge amount of money. And we're looking for someone to actually inherit this money or inherit this trust to help orphans, right? And then they said, for us to actually inherit this trust, we would like to get some personal information about yourself. Stuff like your name, your social security number, your tax ID number, and stuff like that. And then if you're actually respond to those kind of emails, so they get your personal information and then they walk away with it. And that's it. It's gone. Usually these kind of scams are usually spam emails, right? Usually end up in a spam folder. You never see it in your inbox. And we started to see these kind of emails landing in people's inboxes. So that's what kind of made it interesting for us to find out, why these kind of scams are actually starting to show up in people's inboxes. And we started that's when we started digging in deeper to understand, okay, hey, there is a language context to it. There's a sense of urgency, and people are trying to ask for sensitive information about yourself. And most of these emails are coming in from gmail.com. It's not coming in from a suspicious domain, a spammy email domain, right, with low reputation. It's coming from gmail.com. I mean, most of these attacks are actually automated attacks coming in from Google Forms, right? So it has hyperlink to Google Form. If you click it, it goes to Google, and then they actually give you options to actually take your personal information and record it and walk away with it. Then our system actually identified these different kinds of context that's being used. And we also noticed there is no established trust between the sender and the recipient, right? So even though it's coming from a trusted source like Gmail and pointing to a trusted or well-reputed domain like forms.google.com, this was not something that was happening quite often for all the targeted users. That's how we actually identified this attack, and it came to our attention.
How is it that they're getting past Google's spam filters? I think most people would consider that Google's spam filters are probably among the best out there.
Oh yeah, Google spam filters are obviously the best out there. But most of these attacks that we see here are actually landing in people's mailboxes. That's not Gmail. That's not actually provided by Google, for instance, right? So these are instance Microsoft's Office 365 or possibly Microsoft Exchange and different email service providers. Many of the spam filters that we use out there, right? So they try to provide a score to identify what is spam and what is not spam. Because the email is possibly coming in from gmail.com, right? So it also has a reputable link to a suspicious website. It's possibly exceeding the threshold of reputation. So it's most likely to be highly trustworthy, highly reputable to actually skip the spam filters and land in your mailbox.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So what is your take on this? I mean, in terms of folks being able to protect themselves against it, what do you recommend?
What we'd like to recommend is, because it's just not the, benefactor scam kind of attacks, we also are seeing very interesting kinds of attacks, right? Things like people trying to spoof financial institutions, right? Say, for example, one thing that we noticed was someone actually getting an email from American Express saying, hey, your personal details are actually missing. Can you actually fill out this form? And they actually take your credentials, your bank credentials, your personal data, the security questions, and then they walk away from it. Things that we recommend here is to separate your business account from your personal account. Keep business email for business and your personal email for personal use. And on top of that, enable 2FA. Multi-factor authentication is going to be highly important. The users in general try to have to protect their accounts because most of these attacks get to your credentials and walk away with their credentials. And once they have your credentials, they can do further damage to you, or potentially to the people that you are in good relationship with, right? So enabling 2FA is going to be highly important. And on top of that, having security awareness, understanding what about these different kinds of attacks on a constant basis and learning from it is going to be highly important. The thing is, because the attack paradigm is constantly changing, it is a responsibility to actually try to protect our data and also protect ourselves. So security awareness is something that we would, I would highly recommend people to closely follow up on and protect themselves.
You mentioned that these folks are using Google Forms to collect the data, to gather it up. When they're doing that, is that a potential red flag there? Is it obvious that this is a Google form, or are they doing a good job of hiding that as well?
It's a great point. I mean, it's kind of obvious. I mean, if the kind of links they're clicking into and where you're actually filling out this data, if you pay a little bit more attention, you actually know it is Google Forms. It's not actually the website of the brand that's being impersonated. It's not the bank's website. It is Google Forms. But most of these attacks happens with some sense of urgency that dissuades people from not paying this close attention. But if someone had to pay close attention to it, they would actually know this is something that's fake. So this is where I think educating people to be more aware of what they're clicking into and trying to be a little bit more paranoid, a bit more suspicious about those emails that they receive from unknown domains or unknown email addresses would actually help them better protect themselves.
All right, Joe, what do you think?
Interesting interview. Something that Arjun noticed is that the scams are not new. These are not new pretenses or anything. They rarely are new anymore. That's why we have this show, because if you're aware of how this scam works, you will hopefully be able to identify it in any form. But what is new is the techniques they're using to deliver the scam. And those are going to continue to change and develop. And we've talked about people using Google services in various capacities before, and we've had Catch of the Days that talk about this. But Arjun and Armor Blocks have done a deep dive here. And if you go to their blog and read it, it's a pretty interesting post that they have there. These guys are using Google Forms and Gmail because they are trusted and more likely to get by the spam filters.
Right.
You and he talked about the fact that Google spam filters are pretty good, but they're not sending these emails to Gmail addresses. They're sending them from the Gmail address.
Yeah.
And then they're collecting the information on Google Forms as an easy way to collect this data. And it's all free. This is just another way to just lower the cost of trying to collect this information from people.
Mm-hmm. Right. And as you say, I mean, when a request comes from a Google domain, that's certainly well-known, well-established as being legit. So more likely to make it through those filters.
It's not going to get stopped by any web filtering you have going on because it's going to Google. On the blog post, they had an example of an American Express scam where they were asking for your username, your password, your account number, and your mother's maiden name, which is usually security questions. They're really trying to get into the accounts here. Arjun's recommendation about keeping personal email separate from business email is something I've never said before because I made an assumption that everybody already knows this. And that assumption may not be correct. In fact, it almost certainly is not correct. So let me say this now. I agree. Don't do personal business on a business email address. Do it on a personal email address. And one of the biggest reasons for this is you're not going to be at your job forever, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're going to change jobs, and then somebody's going to lose contact with you. And if that person is somebody that you do personal business with, they're going to have a hard time finding you, or you might not be able to get a hold of their email address because you don't have access to that email anymore. I just don't see why people do this.
Well, and also it's an important point that you're not guaranteed that you're going to have access to that business email account forever for a variety of reasons. As you say, you could move on to another job. Mm-hmm. It's possible that the separation of you from your company may not be a friendly one, and so they may cut you off from that email address. It's also possible the company could go out of business, and suddenly, you come into work one day and there's a lock on the door and everything's been shut down, and including the email addresses. So better to have it under your own control.
Yeah, the server could be powered off.
Yeah.
And then you'll never get to it. His recommendation to use multi-factor authentication, again, I recommend you doing that all the time. And it is our responsibility to protect our data. And I like to say, be a little more paranoid. I think that paranoia does you well.
Paranoia, self-destroyer, Joe.
Well, just because you're paranoid doesn't mean they're not out to get you.
That's right. That's right. All right. Well, our thanks to Arjun for joining us. We want to thank all of you for listening. That is our show. And of course, our thanks to the Johns Hopkins University Information Security Institute for their participation. You can learn more at isi.jhu.edu. The Hacking Humans podcast is proudly produced in Maryland at the startup studios of Data Tribe, where they're co-building the next generation of cybersecurity teams and technologies. Our coordinating producer is Jennifer Iben. Our executive editor is Peter Kilpie. I'm Dave Bittner.
And I'm Joe Kerrigan.
Thanks for listening.